I'm here today in my studio, and I have an interviewee with me. But before I introduce her, I just wanted to give us a couple minutes and see if anyone is going to join us. I'm going the wrong direction. This is weird. And I'm going to show you a couple of new outfits I've gotten because they're so cute. Bring me your babies because they will be adorable. I mean, they're adorable anyway, but look at this. I mean, you just saw my messy studio too, but how cute are those? The one on the left, the striped one, is a sleepy hat as well that go with the other outfits, right? I can't wait to use them. I have a minor obsession with the sleepy hats right now. So just know that if you come to see me soon, you need to let me know if you don't want to use a sleepy hat. Because they're so cute. Anyway, I'm here in the studio today. I'm going to grab my coffee mug here too. Mm-hmm. With my beautiful sister-in-law, Olivia Byler. And Olivia, before we get jumping into why you're really here, first, I guess maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Mm-hmm. And don't forget the part about beautiful baby Iris.
Absolutely. So, as Rhiannon said, my name is Olivia Byler, and we are both married to Byler brothers.
We're lucky girls.
Yes, how we're related. I am a new mom to a beautiful 6-month-old daughter named Iris Eleanor, my first child. She is my first child, and I've been surrounded by a number of incredible parents, both in my brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws and my own brothers and that have children as well. So it's been an exciting journey, particularly because we don't live in the United States. We live in Southeast Asia, as you know. Mm-hmm. And Iris was actually born in Bangkok, which was a really unique experience.
Right.
Excellent, though, I will say. The hospitals in Bangkok, if you ever want to have a baby in Bangkok,
good to know.
Highly recommend it. Wonderful healthcare. Nice. And so we have been, we're there for my work, mm-hmm. In literacy education specifically, and we're back in the United States traveling to visit family for the holidays. So this is really fun to be able to speak with you.
Nice. I'm so excited you guys are here. We're really fortunate. They're staying with us for a couple of days before they move on to some other family. Mm-hmm. So we're just soaking up all the time we can get with them and with beautiful baby Iris. So let's talk about Iris for a little bit. And yes, you're a first-time mother.
Yes, I am.
6 months in. She's 6 months old. And she's not kidding when she says she's beautiful. Oh, my word.
I'm biased. But I mean, look at that beautiful child.
Right? They're related. Beauty. It's awesome. Anyway. Talk to me about what it's like now that you're 6 months in. What have been some unexpected challenges, unexpected joys, all those kinds of things. Being a new mother, first time mother, what are your experiences so far, 6 months in? And what advice would you give to somebody expecting their first?
Yeah, great question. 6 months in, I think the biggest takeaway for me is there's always surprises. You think you've got one thing figured out, and then suddenly you're trying to figure out another thing.
Yeah.
So that's both a good thing and a bad thing, because on the one hand, there's always something new to worry about. Mm-hmm. But you realize that before too long, that worry is a long lost memory, right. And suddenly you forgot that you were even worrying about that, yeah. And then you're on to something new. So that's been a big takeaway for me. It's been a great journey so far. I'm also a working mom, so one of the great surprises and joys, I think, is at the end of the day coming home to just an outrageously cute smile as soon as you walk back into the house, and right. She just lights up when she sees me, and that's really been very rewarding. Yeah. It's been... Yeah, there's been a lot of unexpected. Like, the things I wouldn't have expected to be difficult have been difficult, and then the things that I expected to be difficult haven't been so bad. So
right.
For us, we've done a lot of plane travel, and I really anticipated that being very difficult. Mm-hmm. When in fact, it's actually been okay.
Right.
Like, it's maybe not the worst fear that I was anticipating, but car travel, on the other hand, I was not anticipating that being a challenge because I love to ride in the car. Iris hates to be in her car seat. So you do what you got to do.
Right.
And so it's been fun to kind of see where there have been some unexpected challenges and where things have been a little bit easier than I anticipated. In terms of advice, one of the best pieces of advice that was actually given to me by several people, and I have to say I've signed up to this, there's already so many things to worry about, and I feel like the more information is extremely valuable and helpful, but the more you read about things, the more potentially you can get worried about things.
It's overwhelming.
It gets totally overwhelming. And when my best childhood friend, who's got 4 boys, her advice to me was, read a little bit, kind of consume what you can, and then put all the books away. Because at the end of the day, your instincts matter.
Right.
And
I think people forget about that. Like, they think, oh, it's my first baby. I don't know what I'm talking about. But there really is an instinct of what, like, if something's wrong, or I remember hearing before we had our first, from actually another sister-in-law, that you just know, like, you can feel, it's a fever.
Yeah.
And I was always worried with Ellie, like, is this a fever? Like, do I need to go to the doctor? And when she finally had her first fever, I was like, oh, this is unmistakable.
Yes.
Yes,
That's very true.
Even simple things like that, like, you just, what to worry about. You know what not to worry about.
Right.
To a certain extent.
Yeah. You make a good point about it the first times. Like, once you go through, the first fever, the first cold. I remember she got her first lung, like, she got a little congestion in her lungs at 2 months,
Right.
And I was terrified. But again,
we won't mention that was in another country, not the one they live in.
Yeah.
Another story.
But you get through it, and when you get through it, you kind of feel, you get a little bit more confident as a parent, and you know there's going to be, then there's going to be, I don't know, her first time she falls off the bed, which she will do, and you just take it in stride, you deal with it, and you know that it's going to be okay.
Right.
But yeah, I would say that, especially I was mindful of this when I was pregnant as well. There's so much information out there, and I would pick a few reliable sources, and then I would just kind of stick with those sources. So, frankly, breastfeeding, Google is a great resource, clearly, but once you start Googling things, it's really hard. I mean, you're just going to be overwhelmed. So I really love Kelly Mom.
Okay.
As a resource for breastfeeding. Basically,
that's a website.
It's a website, and I've several other mothers have also said it. Have recommended it. It's a resource where they call through, I don't know if you've gone through it.
I've been to it, yep.
Yeah, they call through all kinds of research, and so they're kind of putting out there what's not just a particular opinion, but kind of what the majority of the research says.
If I remember correctly, it's kellymomblog.com, maybe?
I believe so, yes.
I'll put the link to that in the comments after this video to make sure you can click on that if you want it.
But I found that really useful because it's like you ask a question, and the way the blog is set up is it answers those specific questions.
Right.
And that's been very helpful. So I try to just stick with my few resources and not go into these other forums. Because, you can just go crazy.
And I'm sure that when I have other people on the interview to interview for other things, one of the people I want to have on is a lactation consultant. But just from mom's perspective, as a nursing mother and a working mother, I want to just talk about a few of those things. Like, what has nursing been like? What are some challenges you've had, if you're okay talking about that? Yeah. And also, what's it like being a nursing mother that then is going back into the workforce after maternity leave? And how did you prepare for that? What was difficult?
Such a good question.
All those kinds of things.
So we did have challenges in the beginning. Iris wasn't able to latch appropriately, so I had to use a nipple shield up until about 4 months. I do want to say, if you have to use a nipple shield, do not kill yourself over it. It's not the end of the world. I was so stressed out about it, and probably that didn't help. The more stressed you are when you're breastfeeding, the worse it is, right?
Yeah.
It affects everything. I was so stressed about the nipple shield, and it really was a pain to have to use, but it's not the end of the world.
Right.
She I wouldn't say self-weaned, but she just kind of, her mouth grew into the right shape, and she was able to finally take the nipple by itself.
Right.
And then she didn't need it, and it was kind of a seamless,
Right.
weaning process. So again, that was another thing that it was like, just don't freak out about
Right.
it. It will resolve itself eventually.
Yeah.
Of course, some things need a little bit more help than
And she was
others.
still getting fed with a nipple shield on.
Yeah.
Like, that's the goal of breastfeeding or
Right.
bottle feeding, is to nourish your child.
Exactly. She
So-
was getting what she needed. There were
Yeah.
a few times where her weight was not ideal, but again, we got through those, and it was fine. So that was a challenge, and now, we're 6 months in, and she's nursing great. I will say the transition to work was particularly challenging. Pumping is difficult, and it's hard when you go back into the office to try and find times to pump, but you have to set aside those times, because that's your nourishment. That's how
Right.
your baby's being nourished, and so you
Right.
need to set aside those times. I didn't do as good a job preparing for it as I know other mothers do. Like, some mothers have a freezer full of milk before they go back to work. I recommend that if you can, but we were traveling.
Right.
So I just didn't have that opportunity. So it's kind of like I build up for about a week's supply, and then every day I'm adding to it. But there have definitely been times when it's like, I don't know if I'm going to have enough milk for tomorrow.
Right.
And that can, again, be stressful. Which then affects your milk supply.
It's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, it's constant. Again, I would say don't worry about it. And the best advice I've been given, regardless of your opinion about breastfeeding or formula, do not kill yourself if you have to give your baby formula. It is not going to be the end of the world. I was a exclusively formula-fed baby, and I'm relatively okay and healthy, and I got sick last week, couldn't breastfeed her, and we ended up having to give her formula for the first time, and she's fine. And I will continue to breastfeed as long as I can, but if formula needs to be a backup, again, don't kill yourself over it.
And what a blessing that we live in a world where we have formulas that can nourish our children, in a way that they need to be fed at the age that they're at. Like, I ended up having to formula feed 2 of my babies for several months. And it was so hard for me with my first.
Oh, yeah. It's heartbreaking.
It happened all of a sudden. I didn't realize I'd lost my supply. And I just felt like the worst mother in the world. Like, my goal was to breastfeed for 2 years. And, I finally came to the realization of it's better to feed her than to starve her.
Right.
Which is what I'd been doing and not realizing. And so...
It is hard. That first time is really hard, but you have to remember you're still a great mom.
Right.
You're keeping your child alive.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's always hard, but...
So, you're a working mom. We've talked about that now with Iris.
Yeah.
Tell us what it is that you do and what I have you here to talk about today, in addition to my adorable niece.
So I am a literacy specialist, and I work in an international organization that works with ministries of education in different countries, particularly developing countries that don't have as a robust education system as perhaps we do in the United States. So we work alongside the ministry to help them develop an effective reading program for their grade 1 and grade 2 kids. We also establish libraries in government schools so that the children who are learning to read can then go into the library and develop a habit of reading. And we write children's books in the local language so that kids can actually have relevant, linguistically appropriate books to read and practice reading.
All right.
So reading is a passion of mine, and I know what you're going to ask me, and I'm going to go ahead and preempt you.
Go for it.
And say that you should be reading to your child from the very beginning. There is nothing, there is a ton of research that suggests there's a lot of different ways you can teach kids how to read effectively. All of those are important, but one of the biggest factors in children having a habit of reading and learning how to read well, every student is going to learn to read a little differently, and some are going to have more trouble, than others. But a huge predictor of success in reading is kids who have been exposed to reading at a very, very young age.
Really?
Yes. That is one of the biggest and being surrounded by a literate environment, which again, we
Right.
live in a world, in our culture, or in our society, where we are fortunate enough to have access
Right.
to good children's books. I was reading to Iris before she was born. We read every day, even since
Yeah.
she was born. That is going to set her up for a lot more success than a child that isn't introduced to books until they go to school for the first time, which is often the case
Yeah.
in many of the places where I work.
Right.
So read to your kids, even even if it's not, and don't think that you have to read even to your infant. Read them a board book or a simple book. You can read anything.
Whatever you're reading.
Even whatever you're reading,
Yeah.
exactly.
What a great way to get books in when you have babies.
That's right.
That's great.
Read them your, computer science book, which
Right.
Dan was doing at one point. My husband was doing
That's
at one point.
amazing.
But that vocabulary, the exposure that they get to hearing, I mean, granted, they're not processing anything at that age, but
Right.
you're developing a habit where they're hearing a richer vocabulary. And that's another predictor of huge success. Kids whose parents talk to them, even at a very, very young age, read to them, are exposing them to different oral vocabulary. They are much more successful at reading and, frankly, in their academic career than students who don't have that rich kind of vocabulary exposure even from the very beginning.
So this might not be a question for you. I'm guessing you probably know the answer to this, but it's okay if you don't. So you talk about vocabulary. I know that there's research out there that says not to speak to your children in a child's voice or whatever. I don't know how to say it, but to speak to them normally. Does that make a difference? Do you know that? Is it?
That's a good question, and actually, I think that's a really good question, and I think it's more linguistics because I've heard both sides of the argument. I've heard some people say you should speak to your child in a normal voice, using normal vocabulary, and then there is the natural kind of mother's voice,
The phrased voice and cute little words and faces.
Exactly. I've heard that can also be effective for children. I don't think either is going to have an impact on their ability to develop vocabulary skills and, expand their oral vocabulary as long as you're not using baby talk so long with them.
Right.
I mean, with your kids, for example, there would be no reason to continue that baby talk. But Iris is maybe at that age where I still can't help myself.
Right. It's appropriate at 6 months, maybe not 2 years or 3 years or 4 years.
Yeah.
So.
But you can really start having conversations with them. Even another great activity you can do with your kids is picture talking. So there's all different ways to engage with reading in your kids. You can read a story to them. You can tell them a story. Again, it's increasing their oral vocabulary as they're listening. They're hearing different, and it gives them an idea of what storytelling is all about. It gets them excited about stories. So you can tell them a story. You can read them a book. You can read them a short book and show them lots of pictures, or you can read them a chapter book even.
Even at a young age.
Even at a young age, exactly.
Stories without pictures.
I know. Imagine that. Or you could take a whole book and you could just look at the pictures and talk about the picture, and that's what we call picture talk. So you could point to different things and say, "Oh, what is this? This is a cat. What is this? Oh, this is a barn. Oh, what is this?" So you're kind of repeating that back and forth, and it's introducing them to new vocabulary. When they're old enough, you can get them to talk about the picture, ask them questions about it. And when you're reading a story to the kids, you could pause and say, ask them questions as you're going on. So one of the things we like to do when we read aloud in the classroom or in the library, and you can do this as a parent, especially when your kids are old enough to kind of talk to you, you can show them the picture on the front of the page, on the front of the cover, and you can say, "Oh, wow, what do we see on the front? Oh, we see a horse. So, what do you think this story is going to be about?" And get them to talk a little bit about what they might predict.
Right.
That's a very good comprehension strategy.
That's a great idea.
And then as you're going through the book, you don't want to pause too often to ask questions, but every now and then you can be like, "Oh, what do you think's going to happen next?" And you show them the pictures as you go along, and there's all different kinds of ways you can engage with them. But getting them to talk about using their experience, making predictions, and then you could even, after you read the book, you could say, "Well, what we predict? Did it come true?
Right.
What do you think? You know, which characters did you like the most? You can kind of get them to talk about this story. You can even ask them to retell the story if they're old enough, which is something people do with grade 1 and grade 2 students. Like, oh, what happened at the beginning, in the middle? More advanced. But,
Right.
Yeah.
So our kids, so again, my kids are 2, 3, and 4. My 2-year-old is not super verbal. He likes to talk a lot, but his actual words that we can comprehend are fewer, though he's getting new words every day. But we have a favorite bedtime story that we often read. I think it's called A Walk Along the Block or something. But he gets involved in this because we read the story, and then on each page we talk about like what else do you see? Because that's what the point of the story. We're walking along the block to see what we can see.
Perfect.
And my 2-year-old Desmond, he will point to the moon because I always ask, "Where's the moon?" And he knows, and he'll point to the moon, and now he'll point to the cat, and he knows what things are. Being able to say them is a different story, but no pun intended.
But even if he's gibberish, you know, a lot of kids before they develop language will mimic the reading of a story. They'll open the pages, and I've seen him do this, blah, 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 you know, and they're trying to tell the story. Even that's a great sign, actually, because they're becoming familiar.
Even though he doesn't have words.
Even though he doesn't have words, he's becoming familiar with even just the orientation of a book.
Right.
That you open a book, you read, well, not necessarily that you read left to right, he's not going to get that yet, but that you turn the pages in a particular order, you're holding it up. I mean, these are skills we take for granted, but they're actually learned skills. And a lot of kids don't even, you know, will start preschool, kindergarten, even first grade with ever really having that just basic orientation to a book.
Yeah.
So even the fact that he's like flipping the pages and just blah, 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 that's a great thing.
That's awesome.
And I will say, really to develop a good habit of reading in your kids, and this one's a little bit more challenging, I am finding even for myself, it's good to model for them what good reading habits are like. So that means as the parents, it's helpful to have a reading habit as well. It's helpful for them to not only see you reading to them, but also to see you reading yourself.
And not just on your phone screen.
I know, which is kind of where I struggle, because that's actually how I'm like reading a book on my phone screen.
Right,
you know?
like on a Kindle app or...
Exactly.
But they don't know that that's what we're doing.
Right. So every now and then, if you can get out a book, read it yourself in front of them.
A physical book. Oh my goodness. These
read
exist.
paper. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Really helpful.
That's a really good point. So I've had a couple of questions pop in my head. One, our brother-in-law, Wesley, is an amazing... I'd love to have him read books to my kids or just tell stories. He's great at making them up, but he uses voices and all sorts of excitement.
Yes.
Not required, right?
Not required.
Entertaining, but don't feel like you can't read to your kids if there's no voices involved or...
Good point. It's very good point. Not required. However, it is good to model for kids reading with expression, because interestingly enough, fluent readers actually they're not able to read accurately. They're not only able to read fast enough, but they also read with expression. And basically, for any reader, that means, you know, following the punctuation. So pausing when you see a full stop, making somewhat, you know, raising your voice when you see an exclamation point, making sure you've got the right annotation is really important.
Right. So not monotone reading.
Not monotone reading, but you certainly don't have to read with voices. It's
not
more
like
fun
him.
for the kids. Yeah. He is very engaging.
He's very. I highly recommend, if you know Wesley, ask him to tell you a story. It's very entertaining. And then the other question I had, I can't think of at the moment. So, what? Somebody else has a question. It looks like your husband, actually. What's a full stop? I sense maybe an inside joke here as well.
A full stop is what we call in American English a period at the end of a sentence. It's also known as a full stop in other parts of the world.
All right.
So just follow your punctuation.
There you go. That is, I mean, it's a good point. I hear so many people reading, and it's just like total run-on sentence sounding. I'm like, where's where's the emotion, I guess, in this, and where's the...
Yeah. I think...
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the more practice you get reading, even with a little bit of expression, and the pleasure you'll see on your kids' faces will make it a little bit more like, oh, okay, this can be fun. You know? Maybe I'll add a little bit more next time.
Right. I did remember my next question, too. So, literacy is not just reading, but writing, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you were talking about before, reading through a book, and it's like a good sign that he's flipping pages, but not necessarily knowing left to right. Yeah. Making sure I'm saying that correctly. Apparently his mama doesn't know either. I don't either. But what about with writing? So Ellie, my 4-year-old, loves to write her name, but it's always exactly backwards. It's capital E in the right direction. The E's in the right direction, but then L-L-I-E. And all the letters are in the correct... They're written correctly. Yes, yes. But the whole word, like her whole name is backwards.
That's interesting.
Is that something is that an early predictor of like dyslexia or something? Or is that a completely normal, you just need to learn and just keep reiterating?
Yeah. I mean, again, that's something we take for granted, right? The fact that text in English goes from left to right is an orientation. It's pre-writing skills. It's pre-reading skills. So the fact that she can write her letters is awesome. It's just a matter of reorienting her and being like, we're going to start here. And you can do lined paper, and show, kind of have an arrow pointing in the direction that the text should be written just to help her with her orientation. She's clearly able to write, but a lot of kids might struggle even with holding a pencil. So you can do, have them practice holding a pencil in the correct way, drawing shapes. A lot of pre-writing kinds of activities that you might see in workbooks and stuff are getting them used to the sorts of lines they would draw when they write their letters, which Ellie might be more advanced for at this point. But like, half moons and lines up and down the page and circles, and those are all important pre-writing skills. But even the concepts of print, the fact that we do go from left to right is important, but it's not any sort of predictor that your child is
dyslexic. Well, she might be messed up, but that's a different story. So what about like Iris's age at 6 months old? Is there anything that you can do to help set her up for that left to right, or holding a pencil, or what are different things you can do at even a young age to help with the writing side? Right.
So at this point, I'm not as familiar with children's physical development, but she's developing a lot of fine motor skills at this point, right? So I wouldn't go so far as having her hold a pencil or anything like that. She's way too young for that. But as she develops, making sure that she has the right kinds of toys to develop those fine motor skills, because that's what's going to come in play when she writes.
Right.
And then, even reading to her and reading, books to her, she's clearly not following along.
Right.
And she's not following along with the text, but you could even use your finger. A lot of times when we teach kids how to write, we use, eyes and finger, so they follow along in the text. She's probably, again, too young for this, but you could always start with, if you're reading a book to her, just kind of use your finger to flow in the direction that the text is going. And that will, again, it's just going to, from an early age, it will instill this kind of idea. And then as she gets older, she'll eventually it will more easily flow into the habit that these are those concepts of print, and this is how the text flows, and we turn the pages in this direction, and we hold the book upright this way.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I think I only have one more question, unless anyone else has any questions. Feel free to write them in, and she'll answer them, because she's amazing, obviously. Are there, I know I mentioned just things like dyslexia. There's, I'm sure there's more than just that. That's the one that everyone's familiar with as far as like reading, issues or whatever. But are there any early indicators of any of those kinds of things, or
just to be watching out for? That's a really good question. I think one of the earlier ones, and this is not so much into my area of expertise, so I wouldn't want to overstep the specialist, or the learning disability specialist, but there are, I struggled with an auditory processing. When I was young, I struggled with auditory processing, and it's kind of like an auditory dyslexia. So, because one of the fundamental things of learning how to read from the very beginning is being able to connect sounds, the sounds of letters, with the correct letter shape. But I am not an auditory learner. Like, I don't learn well by listening. So when I would hear
College
sounds...
must have been very difficult.
It was. I mean, I had to take copious notes because for me, that was like part of the learning process. I think that's also something to be mindful of. Your kids are all going to have different learning strategies. And some are going to be easier for others to learn how to read. Those with auditory, who struggle to learn to process things auditorially, that's the right word?
Sounds right to me.
Whatever. It will make it a little bit difficult for them to learn how to read because it's so important to be able to connect the sound with the letter shape. And that's a really important first step in learning how to read. So I think as you're going through as you're introducing letters to kids, we sing the ABC song, we do all of these nursery rhymes and things. Those are all kind of prepping them for learning the sounds and the letters. I think you might be able to begin, and I don't know when my mom was actually able to pick up on some of my struggles, but you might be able to learn from an early age as kids start pronouncing things, if they're pronouncing them correctly, or kind of connecting the wrong sounds, and So I mean, I think it's going to come out more in their speech initially, but a lot of kids grow out of that, and once they go to school, they'll learn the correct ways. And so some of that you're not really going to pick up until they're actually in school and they start dealing with some of those challenges. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, actually. Especially if your kid has a really cute pronunciation problem, like kind of, cherish it while you can, because they'll be corrected.
Like my kids all, instead of saying shivering, they say sugaring.
Oh, it's just so
which often coincides with I want hot cocoa because I'm cold, which is very appropriate because they want sugar because they're sugaring.
Oh, that's really quite clever, actually.
Or like their other one that they all say, instead of backpack, we use the word backpack, and they call it an iPack. We are a Mac family, so maybe that's why, but
that's
it's hilarious.
An iPack, I didn't know that. That's
so
funny.
If you hear them mess with their iPack, now you know it's their backpack, and we've tried to correct it. But so those aren't necessarily, it's not necessarily an indication that they do have an auditory type disability. It's just kid being a kid.
Yeah,
but
and just figuring it out. Yeah, figuring it out. And they'll, once they get into the rhythm of schooling and start, even Ellie now in her preschool, she'll start losing some of those cute little...
Just so sad, but necessary. Like, we don't want her to be 20 and still saying sugaring. So
maybe you should.
Right. She'll get picked on so much in high school. Awesome. Is there anything else that you feel like we haven't covered that you feel like is important for new moms or young moms to know about literacy and what they should be thinking about and looking for?
I would just say have books. Enjoy the fact that we live in a world where we can access books. Have books around your kids. Read to your kids. I'm sure everyone already does that. Everyone in my world does, and I'm grateful for that. But it is... Don't forget how important it actually is, and that even now when I read to Iris, I'm already beginning a habit with her that's really important. Yeah, that's all I would say. Awesome. But you asked some great questions.
Oh, thanks. And then I have two more things. Okay. One, are there any questions that you have for me?
Oh.
This could be dangerous.
I have a laundry list of all of my new mom questions.
So cute.
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last, final, the most important question that I have of the day. What's the most superficial thing about you?
Oh God. That's also a long laundry list. Okay, so sometimes when I'm really tired, I will respond to things in a automatically. So somebody might tell me something, and I'll respond a little bit too enthusiastically for what the comment merits, because I'm tired and I'm just kind of on automatic, and it might be something that's a little bit of a high pitch, like, oh wow, or it's really obnoxious. I don't like this about myself, but that it doesn't mean a disgenuousness towards what was being said, but it can sometimes come out when I'm really tired.
All right. Nice. Well, thank you so much. If you didn't catch the announcement on my Facebook page, I had somebody else scheduled for today, but she's still sick. So we're rescheduling for after the first of the year. That's a sleep specialist, so keep your ears open for that, says the mother of a 6-month-old who was awake a lot last night. Yes. So I'll be having her on. I have a prenatal masseuse coming soon, a birth photographer, somebody that's going to be talking about skin products and what to be thinking about, what's important and why it's important. All sorts of things. I've got chiropractors and acupuncturists and doulas and all sorts of people coming on over the next several months. So just keep your ears open for what I have coming up. Everything will also be posted to my blog after it airs on Facebook. So if you miss it here on Facebook, you'll be able to see it there later and be able to search for it pretty easily. And then, yeah.
Come get photographed with her because she's amazing and she does incredible photographs.
Thank you. I was fortunate. They, like I said, they live in Cambodia, but they came to the United States for a family reunion when Iris was 5 weeks old.
Yeah.
So I was able to get her in for a session when she was still pretty young, which is just such a blessing.
And they're beautiful photographs.
Such a blessing.
Very talented.
Oh, thank you.
Big endorsement.
Not that you're biased at all.
Not at all.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you missed the beginning, feel free to go back and watch or check for it on the blog a little later today. And thanks for coming in, Liv. Thanks for filling in last minute.
My pleasure.
I'm so excited that you were able to do this and that you're here in person. So it's such an amazing blessing.
Yay.
So, thanks, guys, and we'll see you soon.